But let's move on to the 5 takeaways to see what 5 things that we did take away from the penalty loss against Fulham in the Carabao Cup second round yesterday. And the first one is midfield problems.
Yeah, so just looking into the stats of comparing the midfield performance statistically against Fulham and against Bournemouth, and you can see the difference. It's just night and day. Against Fulham, all 3 midfielders, Skip, Lo Celso and Højbjerg, completed 1 key pass between them. It was 5 against Bournemouth. Duels won. We won 8 out of 22 duels combined yesterday against Fulham. Against Bournemouth, we won 17 duels out of 31. So not only are we winning more, we're competing for a lot more as well, which shows the lack of aggression that midfield had. We attempted 3 dribbles in that midfield against Fulham, only completing 2 of them, to be fair, but only attempting 3. Against Bournemouth, we completed 7 dribbles, which shows more of the freedom that midfield had. Possession, the midfield 3 lost possession 37 times against Fulham. We only lost it 29 times against Bournemouth. So I think it shows the lack of quality that we had against Fulham in that midfield 3, and I think against Bournemouth it was just night and day comparing the midfields.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on, and it was kind of expected with the midfield players that we did have on the pitch. I expected better from Giovanni Lo Celso, to be honest, in terms of what you're saying, progressing the ball and providing quality in the midfield. But I mean, Højbjerg and Skip were just absolutely tragic yesterday. So let's move on to the number 2, and that is wasteful in possession.
Yeah, and I think again, if you look at the stats of the possession stats comparing the game against Bournemouth and the game against Fulham, I think overall as a team, I think it's just night and day. You can see it. Against Bournemouth, the team lost the possession 104 times. Against Fulham, 149 times. So nearly a third more we were losing possession. Passing accuracy against Bournemouth, 89%. Against Fulham, 82%. Against Bournemouth, we only attempted 31 long passes. Against Fulham, 55 long passes. We were going a lot longer. The short passing wasn't really there, and I think in possession we just weren't able to get closer to the goal. You see the average positions against Fulham. A lot of our average positions are literally in our own half. We weren't able to get into Fulham's half and battle their mid block. Whereas against Bournemouth, it was really pushed up. We were really able to progress the ball, and I just thought in possession the quality was just night and day.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, and that's down to the team that he did play on the day, and the players that we did were just not. They didn't have the quality to really combat what Fulham were throwing at us and to really progress the ball up the pitch, and we dropped deeper than we usually do on when the first 11 are playing, and that's just a frustrating matter. But moving on to number 3, and that is lack of aggression.
Yeah, and this is off the ball, and we're talking about on the ball, the possession and how we lack quality. But if you're talking about off the ball, if you look at the stats for this as well, we really lacked a bit of intensity in winning the ball back, and I think the stats bear that out. Duels won against Bournemouth, won 60 duels throughout the game. Against Fulham, it was only 45. Tackles on the day, 16 against Fulham, 22 against Bournemouth, only 16 against Fulham. So there's a big drop off there. Interceptions, we had 12 interceptions against Bournemouth and we had 7 interceptions against Fulham. Aerial duels, we only won 5 yesterday. We won 8 against Bournemouth. So not only was a massive drop off on the ball with quality, off the ball as well, there was a massive drop off in intensity, getting closer to the Fulham players. And I think that even though we had a bit more defensive players on against Fulham, we also lacked that quality defensively as well.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, I don't know what more I can say about that, but you know, you would think like with Skip and Højbjerg in the middle, the aggression would be there, but it just wasn't, and we just weren't winning the ball back high up the pitch enough, often enough, and it affected us, as you saw on the pitch, quite dramatically, to be honest. But let's move on to number 4, and that is ineffective fullbacks.
Yeah, and we're talking about the comparisons between Porro and Udogie compared to Davis and Emerson. If I look at the average positions between of Porro and Udogie against Bournemouth, their average position is either central or it's really far high up the pitch and in the wide areas, and really looking to ask questions and stretch the play against the opposition. Davis and Emerson, their average position was deep in our own half and out wide, and basically not asking any questions of the Fulham backline, not really getting forward at all, and their touches, they had similar amount of touches to Porro and Udogie, but the touches of ineffective areas, weren't able to get the ball high up the pitch. And also when they did receive the ball, they did lack a lot of quality when it comes to incisive passing and in our build-up play. And they didn't have any crosses throughout the 90 minutes, no key passes. But as well, I think defensively Emerson did all right, but I thought they lacked a lot of aggression as well when it came to where they were picking the ball up and where they were making their challenges. And just comparing them on the ball quality-wise, they were just so much ineffective compared to Porro and Udogie.
Yeah, and I don't think it was any surprise, to be honest, when you're looking at the quality of the two fullbacks that we've played in the last two games to the quality of last night. I mean, Emerson, we know what he brings to the team, and that's defensive solidity, but going forward, he doesn't really bring that much, as we saw against Brentford. You know, he scored a great goal, but that's not down to how good he is offensively. That was just a shot from far out. But apart from that, he didn't really contribute to the team going forward that much that day. But what he did contribute is maybe defensively. Porro has been night and day to him going forward in the last couple of games. And on the other side, I mean, I don't need to say much about the differences between Destiny Udogie and Ben Davies. It's clear for everyone to see. Udogie is just better in every single facet of the game to Ben Davies. So it was no surprise to me that the fullbacks were massively lacking when he changed both of them out, to be honest. But let's move on to the fifth and final takeaway, and that is the standout Mickey van de Ven.
Yeah, and for me, he was the only one upholding the standards yesterday throughout the 90 minutes. I thought statistically, he had 96% passing accuracy, which is more than anyone else. He completed 5 of his 7 long passes. I mean, his defensive stats aren't particularly impressive. 1 tackle, 1 interception, 4 clearances, won 2 of his 5 ground duels, won 1 of his 4 aerial duels. But I did think throughout the game, he was the only one upholding the standards that we'd seen in the first 3 games. He was the only one having a bit of quality on the ball with his ability to pass forward and off the ball as well, putting out fires which were started by a lot of the other midfielders and defenders around him. And if it wasn't for Van de Ven, I don't think we would have made it to penalties.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, he was head and shoulders above everyone on that team yesterday. And I'd even go as far to say that he might have been the best player on the pitch, hands down, even from a Fulham point of view as well. I thought he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was carrying that defence for the majority of the game. He did get that knock towards the end and he was limping after it, which is a worry because if he's out, then that puts us in a really awkward position going into the next couple of games. Luckily, the international break is coming along, but he was just being super aggressive. I thought he took the mantle up well of being a leader in that back line as well. So I thought brilliant stuff from Mickey van de Ven, and hopefully some other players can kind of rise to that level that he was showing yesterday. So that is the 5 takeaways from the game against Fulham, where we crashed out the Carabao Cup yesterday. If we did miss anything out and there are other takeaways to take away from that game, let us know in the comments section below.